Aloha.
Yeah.
My name is Lorna Takehara Strand, and I'm the chair of the Oahu County Democratic Party. And it is such a pleasure to welcome everybody to our forum. This is the first ever, I think, for District 36. And it's such a pleasure to have such outstanding candidates in Marilyn Lee and Trish Chica with us tonight. And I am pleased to also recognize Flora Obayashi, who is from District 48 and soon to become the new SCC representative from her state Senate district. Also, I'd like to recognize Rich Halverson, who is one of the Oahu County's Zoom admins who have volunteered their time to so graciously be able to have these events here on Zoom. And you know, it was a decision that we made with the Oahu County Democrats to basically buy a Zoom account for a year that would allow us to have multiple administrators so that we could spread all around the island and offer events such as this to districts and regions and groups so that they can have forums and meetings in this really crucial election year. And because of COVID and the restrictions that we've had this year, it's just a delight to be able to offer this to the two of you and to this district and to the people of this district. This event is being recorded, and Rich will have it available to all of us so that we can post it on social media and send it to our friends and put it in our albums and archive it. I just want to remind everyone that this is not a debate. We're not holding debates in the Democratic Party. We're all ohana, and we are here to celebrate the fact that we're so lucky to have good candidates running for office in the Democratic Party. We have a majority in the party because of the fact that it's a great party and we have good candidates. And so it's great to be able to offer this to District 36, where the winner of this primary will hopefully be able to unseat the Republican incumbent. It is a district that the Democrats, I know I personally, and the Democrats on Oahu are dedicated to have a Democrat represent us at the state capitol. So it is with a great pleasure that I'd like to now turn this over to Flora, but I'm going to tell you about how we're doing this. Each candidate will have 3 minutes to offer opening statements, which includes their top 3 legislative priorities. Next, they will each offer 2-minute responses to 10 questions. Finally, they will each offer 2-minute closing statements, which they will include, in which they may include their contact information in case voters want to call them and talk to them about any further questions. You may hear, I hope you will hear, a 30-second warning bell. So which means that candidates should start wrapping up their responses. And there will be a waving and a mahalo at the end of that period too. So let's turn it over to the forum, shall we, Flora?
Aloha, everyone. By virtue of the coin toss, we will begin with Marilyn offering a 3-minute opening statement, and next, Trish will offer hers. Marilyn?
Thank you very much. And thank you very much to Lorna and Flora and everyone else who's helped in putting this on, because it's one of the first things we've ever had like this in the district, and I'm excited. So I hope I can hear the bell when it rings. I'm Marilyn, running for state representative in District 36, Mililani. And we are living through history. Every day there's something new happening, and we must change with the tide. The thing that has dominated our lives for the past 5 months is the coronavirus, which has wreaked havoc through our economy, emptied our schools, and caused everything, financial distress for our citizens, and really changed our life. It's the new normal. As a legislator, I served through the 2008 downturn, but it was nowhere near as severe as this. There are some positives. Our state has had one of the lowest rates of death and infection compared to states across the nation. Our leaders should be commended for their action on this. The community has come together to provide food and other necessity and compliance with hygiene, social distancing. However, as things open up, we may find that our numbers of infections increase. As an experienced registered nurse, I'm quite familiar with infection control measures and feel this will be a real advantage as we move forward with keeping our population healthy. Because of the devastation of our tourist industry, we must create new jobs to replace those lost, at least until there is substantial recovery. This can be an opportunity to train some of those furloughed as contact tracers, nurses' aides, and screeners. There are many ideas for new industries too. The manufacture of ventilators and PPE, for example. We will also need many new jobs in public health teaching. There's a lot to think about, but 2 areas that will need much attention is our homeless population, which will no doubt increase, and we need to look at new ways to build affordable housing. Sometimes the community is unwilling to accept affordable rentals. However, if everyone would remember the old saying, there but for the grace of God go I, it would make a big difference in the acceptance of such housing. I have participated in the annual point of time count for the homeless of the last 4 years. Getting folks into housing is a basic step in their transformation. Okay, I hear the bell, and so I will continue this as part of my closing statement. And thank you so much for the opportunity.
Hello.
I guess that's my cue to start. Good evening, everybody. My name is Trish Chica, also running for the state representative seat for House District 36. Thank you to Lorna, Rich, and Flora for helping to organize tonight's event. Lorna said it right. Last year, my family and I were tuning into the presidential debates and just wondering who the best candidate would be to challenge President Trump. And I truly believe this year's election is the most important in our lifetime. Now we're in the middle of a public health crisis, right? There's 200,000 people in our state who are jobless, and those who are employed have to choose between their health or collecting a paycheck. And to me, it doesn't have to be this way. And that's why I'm running for office. I'm running because we have a system in our country, in our state, that doesn't take care of families. Hawaii has one of the highest rates of homelessness in the country. We can't keep our teachers. We have the highest cost of living in the country. And young families who, my neighbors, are leaving Hawaii for a better life on the mainland. And Marilyn's right, experience is important. I've worked in public health for over a decade now. I have experience at the national, state, and local level. I worked with our congressional leaders in DC. I worked in the executive branch under Governor David Ige and have existing relationships with our directors of health, human services, and Medicaid. And in my current role, I'm grateful to have the opportunity to work with hundreds of advocates across the nation. One particular bill that we've been working on with our teenagers, our young advocates, is a bill that would prohibit the sale of candy-flavored vaping products, but year after year, it continues to stall at the legislature because of the influence of big tobacco. And I'm not afraid to fight big money. And that's what I'll bring. I'm going to continue to fight for this community, for working families, no matter what. And if elected, my immediate legislative priorities would be to help us navigate the uncertainty caused, by COVID-19 and restoring our people's trust in government and how we can navigate this crisis. I'm going to work closely with our schools for them to be more flexible and supportive of our students, our parents, and our teachers. And I'm going to support our working families by, protecting their wages, continuing telework. I think that's really important, and providing paid sick leave. So the parents have to choose between collecting a paycheck or having to care for their child or their parent. And finally, I really want us to strengthen our public health system and continue to fund the critical services that our families need. And this includes investing in accelerating services for the houseless. Thank you.
Thank
Mahalo.
Thank you, Marilyn and Trish. You will get a 30-second warning, and then you'll wrap it up, and Lorna will let you know when you're done. Our first question will go to Trish. Tell us why you're a member of the Democratic Party and what you believe are the key aspects of its platform and mission. Explain how you plan to execute that mission with your legislative priorities in the state legislature. Trish, and then Marilyn.
Thank you. Thank you for this question because it speaks to my values. I was born and raised in the Philippines. My first job out of college was as a journalist, where I saw firsthand the impact that a corrupt government has on its people. And story after story, I would tell my boss that and ask her, surely, there's something more that we can do. But every time she would always tell me, your job is to cover the news, not to intervene. Well, I guess I'm the intervening kind, because when an opportunity came to move to the United States, I jumped at it and I wanted to pursue a career in policy. And that's why I also joined the Democratic Party. To me, the Democratic Party represents the embodiment of the First Amendment rights that I see suppressed in the Philippines up to this day. It's freedom of speech, it's freedom of the press, and self-expression. And this is happening in our country right now. And I've served, in many roles within the Democratic Party. I've served on the Platforms Committee, and I'm a proud, servant in that role. I believe that the platforms allows for autonomy, individualism, and striving to uphold the rights of all people. And that's what I'll fight for if elected. I believe that in the Democratic Party's principles and its possibilities. I believe that everyone, regardless of income or immigration status, should have affordable and accessible health care. I believe in racial justice for all, comprehensive immigration reform, and criminal justice reform. I believe that schools should be fully funded, staffed, and trained to support our students. I believe we have an urgent need to respond to the climate crisis. I believe our children deserve the best future possible to pursue their dreams without worrying about debt. And finally, I believe that government should work hard so that the people it serves should never, ever have to feel powerless. And that's what I hope to bring. And given the opportunity, I will work by your side to build a better future for our children and grandchildren. Thank you.
Mahalo.
Marilyn?
Thank you very much. And thank you, Trish, because your ideas are very valid and I agree with most of them. As far as identity, I'm a lifelong Democrat. I was born into the party. My father was a factory worker. There's never any question. I didn't have anything to say about it. I grew up in an immigrant neighborhood in upstate New York. We had Polish people, Italian people, Czechs, all kinds in our neighborhood. And I learned about diversity through the school I went to, which was very, very mixed and was very, very local and was very, very full of kids who often couldn't speak English. And in those days, we didn't have these English as a second language program. So I was, one of the things I tried to do was be friends with a lot of the immigrant children, and some of them grew up and they became doctors and politicians and did a lot of really great things. So the highlights of the platform to me, besides many of the things that Trish has said, are workers' rights. And really that's how the modern Democratic Party has developed, because of what the workers did back when they couldn't make their own decisions when they were really abused. And workers' rights are really one of the bases of the modern Democratic Party. Women's rights, which I've worked on for many years as part of the Commission on the Status of Women and in the community as well. Thank you.
You have 30 seconds.
30, keep
More.
going,
Okay.
Marilyn.
I'll go through the other ones I'm talking about. Gay rights, diversity, and healthcare are some of the other things that I think are really fantastic parts of the platform of the Democratic Party.
Okay, thank you, Marilyn. The next question is for you. The COVID-19 pandemic has negatively affected the flow of tourist dollars into the local economy. Tell us what you think about the intersectionality between public health and economic health, and what proposals you might have to rescue the economy.
Okay, well, the economy, absolutely, COVID-19 has disrupted the economy. There's no doubt about it. And it's not just because of tourism. Public health and economic health are tied together. People lose jobs, they lose their insurance. Government receives less in tax revenue, so it cannot support the social safety net as well. We have a very effective economic engine, which is the University of Hawaii. And I hope everybody understands that how much the University of Hawaii does contribute to our economic well-being. And there are a lot of things that can be done that they're actually working on. So we must support it and recognize all it does. We must keep our state as healthy as possible by following best practices. If I had the answer at how to rescue the economy, I would be happy to do so. I think it will take all of us working together and making some sacrifices to do so. I would like to suggest that the aerospace program at the University of Hawaii might be one economic driver. TMT definitely will be an economic driver for the Big Island. And raising the minimum wage, even though it might only be 15 or 17% and not a living wage yet, will really help the economy. That will put more money into the economy and help a lot of the people who are living day to day and don't have savings and can't really participate in the life of the community. Everybody is going to have to make sacrifices. And I think that's one important thing to remember. A lot of you have made sacrifices. You've stayed at home, you've worn your mask, you've done social distancing, you haven't been able to go out, you have your children at home, you have to teach them. So those are the sacrifices, and there may be more in the coming years, and it's going to be difficult in the legislature, but I'm ready to do it. Aloha, and thanks for listening.
Trish?
Yeah, you know, Hawaii's economy has been hit the hardest during this pandemic out of any other state. You know, our service, retail, and tourist industry make up a good portion of the revenue that's collected by the state, and they're already sacrificing, you know, a lot. And to answer this question, I think we need to understand two things. One, we cannot reopen the economy if we don't prioritize public health and safety first. You know, and I've been working on this issue since the pandemic started. Right now, our cases are continuing to climb again, and Governor extended the mandatory 14-day quarantine to September 1st. So this means we have a month to control community spread and prevent overwhelming our hospitals. Two, there is no economic recovery without childcare. Every single parent I've talked to feels the same anxiety as I do. You know, working parents are being forced to return to the workplace when they don't have childcare options. And government needs to make teleworking the default then rather an option. And we need to subsidize childcare costs, right? I think in Maui, they're doing $10 per week. And we can do that on a sliding scale. We need to provide paid leave to give our families the comfort of not losing their job. And government can continue to provide forgivable loans to employers to rescue the agriculture industry, to rescue our small business industry. On the road to recovery, I strongly support moving away from our over-reliance on tourism and invest in educational programs to promote higher paying jobs in technology, green jobs, clean energy, and healthcare. And we have two sources of revenue, our income taxes and GET. And, our low income families in Hawaii are pay twice as much taxes than those who are at the top 1%. So where is the fairness and equity in that? I think we need to look at new sources of revenue that don't burden our working families, but capture the tax breaks that are enjoyed by our top corporations and the 1%. So people making more than $500,000 a year and that profit of investments here in Hawaii. Thank you.
Trish, here's the next question. Due to the pandemic, it is projected that more businesses will shut their doors, that local families will be in dire straits facing evictions or default on mortgages and other obligations and experience hunger.
Mm-hmm.
What remedies or relief measures might you propose to alleviate the scale of human suffering?
I'm part of the Working Families Coalition, and it's a struggle just listening to the stories week after week. Here in Hawaii, our working families are struggling with the highest rates of unemployment, income loss, and housing insecurity due to the pandemic. And as part of the coalition, we've sent two proposals to the administration providing recommendations on how to spend CARES funds. In April, Hawaii received $1.25 billion in federal funds. So this is the CARES monies to be spent on state and local response to COVID-19. And this has to be expended by the end of the year, December 30th. About half of this was allocated to the various counties, including the city and county of Honolulu, and leaving about 630 plus in unspent funds. So week after week, we were meeting with coalitions from organizations from across the state, including people who were affected, who lost their jobs. And we had one message to our elected officials: you spend the CARES monies on the people and the families who need it the most. We opposed banking the funds in the rainy day fund. And our proposal included, which can be found on workingfamilieshawaii.org, includes allocating money for healthcare to protect those who are losing their healthcare coverage, to go to investments in our community health centers and some family health support. It also puts funding into social services to fund mental and behavioral health, legal services for immigrants, childcare assistance, childcare, and wellness for our kupuna who are isolated. And it also provides for basic needs, immediate relief in housing, utilities, and food. And I believe we were successful. The legislative session just ended last Friday, and they ended up passing a budget and plan that puts money more into the needs of our families than the rainy day. And I think these are the skills that I can bring to the legislature, the ability to bring community together, to push a common agenda, and to work with our lawmakers and our groups to improve our state. Policy is tough to pass, but I have the experience in being able to do so. Thank you.
Thank
Hello.
you. Marilyn?
Thank you. And thank you, Trish. You have a lot of good ideas and you've done a lot of work. I would like to say that the social safety net is something that's always been extremely important to me as a registered nurse working in a community that's somewhat depressed of Wahiawa. I observed a lot of needs, and that's not even here with COVID-19. It's been for a number of years. Again, I'd like to say we must take responsibility. We must care for each other, and we can't think that government's going to do it all. Government, business, and the private sector need to be involved, and I feel very strongly about that. And we can't have a bunch of people who are up in their ivory towers and not worried about the numbers of homeless in our community. We should give generously to the struggling nonprofits. I happen to work with a nonprofit that's related to homelessness. The nonprofits are having to raise money for operating funds, and it's really a shame that they have to spend time out in the community making money with fundraisers and can't spend full time doing their work. We're expecting a 40% increase in homelessness in the coming year, and that is going to be a real struggle. The key to it is finding housing and getting the people out of this, off the street. The problem with people being on the street is they may become a vector for COVID-19, and that would be a real disaster. I would like to see, unfortunately, the legislature really didn't give GIAs this year, which is something that a lot of the nonprofits have depended upon. While I was in the legislature, I was thinking, well, why should we give these monies to nonprofits to pay their operating costs? I know now, because I'm working very closely with one, and I think the legislature needs to do better maybe at looking at the effectiveness of each and every nonprofit and looking at what their outcomes are. So thank you for—
Mahalo. Mahalo.
Marilyn, the next question is on transportation. Central and West Oahu residents must live with traffic congestion, long commutes, and gridlock, which directly impacts their quality of life. Development projects of over 25,000 housing units have been approved, and once built, may increase commute times to 2.5 to 4 hours in a day. Rail capacity from West Oahu to Ala Moana cannot accommodate the total increased demand. What legislative proposals do you have to realize or to relieve the untenable transportation problem?
I wish I did have the complete answer to that, because it's been a problem for our Central Oahu and Leeward communities for quite a long time. Proposals to improve transportation. First, do not underestimate the value of transit. It must be completed, and citizens must give it a chance to succeed. It succeeds all around the world, in underdeveloped countries and developed countries. In our big cities, there's a 100-year-old transit system in New York City that works really well. Also, don't discount the importance of personal responsibility, which should play a role in using van pools, flexible work hours, especially in town industries and offices, and carpools will help. As I stand waving signs on the side of the road, what do I see? I see most cars with one person driving, and that's a little bit of ridiculousness, isn't it? Because, you know, if we want to have less traffic, we've got to take the cars off the road. Actually, since the COVID-19, the traffic's been a little lighter coming from Mililani. I don't know about the west side. An overabundance of tourists driving rental cars have contributed to the traffic mess as well. We just saw the ad in the paper that Castle and Cook is going to sell the 35 of their new homes, and Koa Ridge is a huge development which will increase the traffic tremendously from Mililani, and actually when it meets at the merge from the west side as well. So they're doing some improvements, but there needs to be more in infrastructure changes, and we always wanted to see a roundabout connecting Mililani to the H1 and the H2. A tremendous expense, but in reality, it's something that will need to be done in the future, and I'd like to work on something like that.
Mahalo.
Thank you, Marilyn. Trish?
Yes, you know, as a working mom, I'm one of those many commuters who sit in traffic each and every day for hours, including when I was 8 and a half months pregnant, and I don't recommend it. And you know, this is why this question hits home for me, and I've thought about it a lot. I think right now, you know, we're still in the middle of a pandemic, and so I would still encourage that we push for employers to make teleworking the default so that we don't have to sit through traffic. But, you know, I also support alternative transportation. I do believe that our future here on this island is better with public transportation, better with rail than without rail. And I want to see it completed. But we need to do it the project in the right way so it doesn't waste our tax dollars. And there's three things to make it easier for Mililani residents to access public transportation. One, I want to make it easy for Mililani and Central Oahu commuters to access rail. There's actually a plan to construct a Pearl Highlands garage, so like a park and ride that our Central Oahu communities can use. We're able to get off of the H2 and get on rail pretty easily. This is something that must be awarded and within budget. We need frequent bus routes. We have a lot of Mililani workers that use the bus. So I want to work with the city to make riding the bus at little or no cost to our seniors, our students, our special needs population. We'd be able to access that. And our bus rail integration plan finally needs to be revisited to accommodate people with various needs. So pregnant women, parents pushing strollers, people who have bikes and surfboards. And finally, we have to do something about the high number of traffic fatalities that have affected us here in Hawaii, and in Mililani in particular. And I'm a big supporter of Vision Zero, which gets us to 0 deaths and injuries involving road traffic. Thank you.
Marilyn?
We're on transportation? No, we finished transportation. Now we're on affordable housing. Right?
Oh, it's Trish. I'm very sorry. Trish. In 1961, the State Land Use Commission was created to protect prime agricultural lands from development into residential use. The LUC is tasked with enforcing developer commitments for affordable housing. However, major landowners and large project developers have worked to bypass or to abolish the agency. Despite the pressures from these commercial enterprises, what are some possible ways to create more affordable housing on Oahu?
You know, Flora, affordable housing is a topic that's near and dear to my heart because housing is clearly the largest cost for myself and my husband, and why we live in a multi-generational household. There's a few things I believe the state should do. One is to lower the affordable housing standard to no more than 80% AMI. AMI is area median income, so which means not paying for more than about $600, $700 a month to make housing truly affordable. Two, we need to enforce requirements on developers to build the required number of affordable housing units mandated by law and require that they stay affordable for at least 30 years. And for this to happen, we also need to remove the barriers that stop developers from fully utilizing incentive programs such as the Rental Housing Revolving Fund. Next, we need to prioritize affordable housing and subsidize developments for workforce housing. So this is for teachers and government employees. They need to be able to live and commute to the areas close to where they live. We have a lot of Mililani teachers that commute to Nanakuli and other parts of the island. And finally, I would oppose any efforts to weaken the authority of the Land Use Commission and the DLNR to protect our resources. I think development should be done responsibly. I think that we should also look at building in existing high density areas, so building up, and also prioritize developments along the rail corridor and create a type of development fee, you know, a fee on developers so that that fee is being reinvested back in the community. And finally, I would support some type of Kama'aina First program that gives locals the preference to bid on a home within the first 20 days or so of being on the market. Thank you.
Thanks, Trish. Marilyn?
Affordable housing, and that's another issue that's been here for many years. And I agree with many of the things that you said, Trish, because you had some good ideas. The Land Use Commission is still a valuable link to housing needs, and I don't ever want to see it discontinued. And I think there have been efforts to do so, but I will picket the state legislature if they ever come up with that idea. I think we need to make infrastructure improvements on fallow lands and lands that are not being used, because that is one of the things that increases the cost of housing. And, you know, you see going up Cam Highway where Coal Ridge is being built, you see all the trucks and the trailers. Most of that's being financed by the developers. Now, that's why they've got to make some money. I'm not sympathetic with, you know, when they overprice their homes. They're advertising $1 million as an affordable home, but that's not quite my idea of it. But I think the government needs to help out with completing the infrastructure costs so that the lands will be ready for development of affordable housing, and that includes water and electricity as well. Communities need to be supportive of affordable development. So we had an occasion in Mililani, Mauka, where workforce housing was proposed to be built. The community was so much against it that it now has become for homes for seniors. And of course that's needed too, but what we really needed was workforce housing. And you're absolutely right. You know, there's a lot of teachers that are commuting a long way when they could have lived in that nice development. Even though it is low income, a lot of our teachers aren't making very much money. So would have been a great place to have for our workforce.
Mahalo. Mahalo.
All right. Our next question is for you, Marilyn, on climate change.
This is climate change, yeah.
Yeah, climate change is causing sea level rise and more frequent extreme weather. What would you propose to help Hawaii adapt to the adverse impacts of climate change?
Well,
what would you propose?
Sorry. I'm trying to answer.
What mitigation measures would you propose to protect and preserve our coastal communities from king tides and eroding shorelines?
Well, that's a area that I'm very, very interested in, climate change. We are a small little island out in the middle of the Pacific, and so we can do a lot of things, and we are doing a lot of things, but unless the rest of the nation follows, it's going to be difficult for us to make a big impact. But disaster preparation is a critical aspect of preparing for climate change. And I've been one of the original members of the Mililani Town Disaster Preparation Team. Everyone must do his part on this too. It's you know, if you think that when a big storm comes that the Army's gonna come out and rescue you, think again. They're gonna be down at the airport helping unload supplies. So everyone must try to harden their home, because what's gonna happen in a big storm is the people who live in the inundation zones are gonna come up to Mililani and get into the few shelters we have, and we're going to be stuck. So these changes are expensive to make to homes, and I would propose tax credits for homeowners to harden their homes. Additionally, we need to decrease our carbon footprint. We've been doing that with lots of our renewable energy initiatives. We need to get more cars off the road, or more efficient cars on the road. We must no longer allow housing in inundation zones, and we must save water and energy with renewable resources. The inundation zones, unfortunately, include a lot of Waikiki and a lot of the Eva Beach side, and you know, building so close to the ocean might have been a lovely thing a few years ago, but it's no longer should be permitted because of storms and inundation. And that costs a lot of money for everyone. Thank you.
Trish?
Thank you. So yeah, addressing climate change is one of my priorities. I'm, proud to be supported and endorsed by the Sierra Club and the local chapter of 350.org because of my priorities in climate change. And I believe we have an urgent need to meet our 2045 energy goals. I think at the community level, individuals, and we can take steps to strengthen our homes and property from potential damage caused by flooding and winds. Also important is getting to know our immediate neighborhood and to map out our neighbors and their pets so that who may need help in times of a disaster. In fact, it was the Mililani disaster preparedness team that was the first group that I activated in early March to spread the message of social distancing and to stay at home. At a state level, we can push for more permanent change. I think we need to eliminate the problem of wastewater that's damaging our coral reefs. We need to protect our water from corporate interests. We need to build away from the shoreline and in areas that are susceptible to sea level rise. I was really concerned when the latest reports from the Hawaii Climate Change Commission had shown how Oahu can be as vulnerable as up to 3.2 feet of sea level rise in the next 30 to 70 years. This is going to wipe out Waikiki. This is going to cost us billions of dollars, and this is going to impact children's generation. And we need to do something about it. We need to speed up our transition to renewable energy, eliminate our use of fossil fuels, and we need to make owning solar and electric vehicles more affordable for our families. And finally, it shouldn't be on our state alone. I'm going to work with our federal government to ensure that funding comes in to help our communities pay for protections before a disaster hits again, as we've seen it in the last 2 years with the Kauai floods and the Kilauea eruptions. Thank you.
Okay, Trisha, given the shortages in the state budget, teacher shortages, and the risk of coronavirus, what is your position on increased funding for public education? How would you fund it, and by how much of an increase?
I think on the how much, I believe it is government's responsibility to fully fund, fully staff, and fully train our schools so that they're prepared to meet the diversity of our students entering the classroom. We are fortunate to have, strong public schools here in Mililani. And right now, I believe that sending kids back to school during a pandemic and hoping for the best is not a plan. Forcing schools to reopen without the resources for them to do so, safely endangers our kids and our teachers and our staff. I hear from teachers every day who are scared about reopening, who feel unprepared and untrained to do remote learning, and who feel underappreciated, devalued, and they really, really love our kids. They're our second homes, and we want to do everything in our power to support them. We want to do everything in our power to support our educators and our students. And I would advocate against any pay cuts to our teachers and state employees right now, as what had happened in the last recession. I think every effort must be made to pursue alternative sources of funding to protect their wages and to save their jobs. So the last thing is to say is that we'll continue to lose teachers if the school environment is under-resourced or we don't address cost of living. All schools that serve kids should not have to compete for resources. Mililani may have strong schools, but not the schools in the areas the towns that surround us. Waipahu, Wahiawa. As a state lawmaker, I want all schools to be the best schools. I want programs and services that address poverty, trauma, and access to healthcare, because it shouldn't have to be on our teachers to carry that burden alone. Thank you.
Thank you, Trish. Marilyn?
Okay, well, I certainly share your opinion that we should not cut the teachers' pay. The other thing we should not do is establish furlough Fridays, which happened in 2008 and 2009 under a Republican administration. That was a big disaster, and I believe that public education, including the university, should not receive any cuts. We must open our schools, though, as our students have already lost one entire quarter of the school years. And we stand money if we don't open it. I mean, our president's threatening that, but I think it really is important to get the children back to school and to get the families back to work. My own that children I'm getting a lot of interference. Can I don't know who's talking while I'm talking. Can I get a little extra time in? Our Mililani schools are planning and will attempt to execute a safe plan, and I think they really do have a good plan, and they have good communication with the parents. I've sat on the school community council at Mililani High School for the last 8 years. Prior to that, I've been on the school community council at Mililani Wyandotte. I've been a PTSA president, and I always am willing to help out at the schools. We can always use more funding for schools and teachers' salaries. There's no doubt about that. Some have advocated for a dedicated source of funding, and proposals over the last few years have failed. It's a difficult thing to pass, but I would agree with funding a dedicated source. The question is, what can pass? Education does already occupy a major part of our budget, but we ought to look at what we can get in terms of federal funding, and also look at how we can work with the community and with businesses to fund aspects of education and improvements in the schools. So I think that there's a lot that can be done. I think we have a great group of teachers and principals in Mililani. Some of them I've worked with for years and years, and we're very fortunate to have the best high school in the state. But I agree with Trish that also the communities of Wahiawa, Waipahu, the Nanakuli in Waianae, and the neighbor islands in particular have not been treated fairly in many ways. But of course, the CIP appropriations are something that is dependent upon the legislator in your community. I'm proud of the fact that when I was a legislator, I brought back a lot of CIP to the community.
Thank you, Marilyn.
Okay.
Next question is on the livable wage and benefits. The Democratic Party advocates for a livable wage. Given the reality of the economic situation due to the pandemic, what is possible for providing a livable wage and benefits, and why? Marilyn?
Livable wage, yeah. I'm not sure I haven't read that portion of the party's platform and wonder what they are considering a livable wage. I know I'll get that to approve after a while. But if we can accomplish a raise in the minimum wage to 15 or 17, that would be a great accomplishment in the next session. It's going to be difficult, and I'm sorry to say that the raise in the minimum wage has been roundly opposed by the Chamber of Commerce and by many businesses because they feel that it's going to contribute to the cost of doing business. But in actuality, when people have a little more money in their pockets, they're going to be spending more, and that's going to actually increase our tax revenues. Now, in terms of benefits that people in the community receive, there lots of things that we could be doing to help people who are in low income. We do have the food stamp program. We do have the programs that assist the homeless. But one of the things that we really need to do is to cooperate and helping to provide food by contributing to some of the nonprofits that are now distributing food in the community. The other thing is that okay, I guess I have a little more time here. Okay, there's a lot more to be done on this. And again, I want to emphasize, to be appreciating the nonprofits in our community who are working so hard with the homeless, with the elderly, with many of the people in our community who need help, because they really, I used to think, oh yeah, why should we pay their operating funds? I understand now. We need to help. We can.
Thank you, Marilyn. Trish?
Yeah, so the proposals that were sent to the legislature in the last couple of years for a livable wage would be to raise it to $17 per hour by 2023, which means setting the increases so that it correlates to the consumer price index. And it what this means is because each year the minimum wage doesn't increase, workers lose purchasing power due to inflation, right? So things like childcare and healthcare costs are far outpacing inflation. Here in Hawaii, a family is expected to pay $13,000 in annual childcare costs, while a family of 4 is expected to pay $40,000 in healthcare coverage each year. And this is why we need competitive wages to afford a livable life here. Given I absolutely support a livable wage. I've submitted testimony in support of it. And given the current situation, however, it will only be feasible for businesses to raise wages for workers when we can go back to a healthy spending climate and consumers feel confident in making purchasing decisions. I think a report came out last night where it said we're not going to get to those levels until 2029. And as I said before, you know, for that to happen, we need to do a few things. We need to, one, protect our workers. It means protecting our current wages, our current benefits, including retirement benefits. I am opposed to the pay cuts coming at a time when so many of our government workers are frontline and essential workers. We need to sustain our families, so continuing telework, providing paid leave, and subsidizing the cost of daycare or healthcare, and finally to rebuild our economy. We should be promoting a workforce development program that offers higher paying jobs so that people can go to these jobs in green jobs, clean energy, healthcare, and technology. And I believe we should make tuition free for people to be able to learn those skills. Thank you.
Wow.
Thanks, Trish. Next question, Trish. 56% of Oahu's electricity is generated by sources such as oil and coal, solar, biomass, and wind. What would you propose to meet the 100% renewable energy mandate by 2045?
I believe, you know, we need to act as quickly as possible to respond to our climate crisis. I was there when Governor signed in 2015, when Governor signed the 2045 goal. But I believe, you know, 2045 is an arbitrary number that shouldn't slow down or hinder immediate action. There's a few things we can do to reduce our emissions and lower the global temperature. As I mentioned, I want to make the transition to renewable energy more affordable for working families. So continuing to the tax credits and advocating for those so that families can install solar and renewable energy infrastructure, and make the purchase of owning an electric vehicle more affordable. And that goes into prioritizing clean transportation. Transportation accounts for about 2/3 of our fossil fuel consumption. And you mentioned 56%, but actually 78% of Hawaii's electricity still comes from fossil fuel. And so I would invest in multimodal public transportation and complete streets to keep our families to, you know, bike and walk and do things that allow them to travel cleanly. And getting to 100% renewable energy faster. There's a thing called renewable portfolio standards. So what it means is it requires that a specific percentage of our electricity sold by utilities comes from clean energy. And we need to continue to invest in and expedite that clean energy infrastructure to get up to speed to 100% renewable energy. Here in Mililani, actually, there's solar farms. I think 16 acres, or 12 acres. And there's the sheep there in partnership with the farmers control vegetation. And so I would support projects like that.
Thank you, Trish. Marilyn?
Thank you. Obviously, I would agree with a lot of the things that you said, Trish, so I won't repeat those things. But the solar farms in Mililani, a lot of us on the neighborhood board have supported those for over the years, brought speakers to the neighborhood board. And I like the idea of solar farms because then you don't have to have that large apparatus on top of your roof. And the expense is really going to be eventually cut down so that it's sort of a communal effort. The renewable energy 100% by 2045, well, I just heard that Joe Biden, assisted by Bernie Sanders, has put forth a plan to meet the 100% goal by 2035. So this is wonderful news, and this is I haven't seen it yet. He hasn't actually put forth the details, but we really do need a national plan, just like we need a national plan to defeat the COVID-19 epidemic. We've had a very, very poor national leadership, and so we're in the situation that you see we are. But I think if we do support the election of Joe Biden, assisted by Bernie Sanders, and that's a wonderful thing to see them working together on this. And I think we'll be seeing what the plan encompasses very soon, and we must move forward towards the goal, I think, and working towards the national goal is a great way to go.
Okay, thank you, Marilyn. In 2018, the current Republican incumbent won her seat with 51.3% of the vote. What strategy might you employ to defeat the incumbent in 2020? Marilyn?
The Republican incumbent is in her first legislative session, and those of us who attend the neighborhood board have found it really interesting that she's the first representative who's come to the neighborhood board and not talked about her accomplishments, but talked about everything that she voted no upon. So I found that really strange, and I think that's something we can really talk about and wonder why, she's so negative about legislation. The district has changed a lot since I first lived here. Demographics have changed, and community has grown tremendously. Mililani Mauka wasn't here at all. It's been extended all the way up to the very top of Mililani Mauka. But the party has not grown with it, and we need to strengthen our precinct and district organizations. Those of you who lived in Mililani for a long time remember Joe Conant. He was our district chair. He was wonderful. We had meetings every Sunday, and we talked about events that we could plan to show how the Democratic Party is superior to the Republican Party. And make no mistake, there are Republicans in this community and plenty of Trump supporters. In the past, we've had organized party activities, raised a big tent, invited the community. Republicans watch what is happening. Tradition has been that party officials did not use their titles in brochures supporting candidates. Unfortunately, tradition has died. And however, a new policy passed in April makes doing so a violation. And the violation may not be technical, but it's sometimes in spirit. Social media can be a big help, and it has expanded a lot. I've tried to set a good example and follow tradition and the recommendations of our health leaders. Republicans note these things too. So I'll try my best, if I win the primary, to take out this Republican. She isn't a mean person like the previous Republican incumbent, but she certainly could be a Democrat could certainly be an improvement over her.
Wow.
Thank you, Marilyn. Trish?
Yeah, our demographics here in Mililani are changing as I go door to door, when it was safe, and talk to voters every day. I listen to what matters, what issues are important to them. And we need to offer our voters here in the district another choice against the current Republican incumbent. I believe we are best positioned to defeat her. I respect my fellow Democratic candidate and all that she has done for the community. But the history from the last 4 elections show that voters of our district, are voting for new blood. And this being a presidential year, I would take advantage of our Republican incumbent's support of President Trump. Mililani has been on the edge of turning blue for many years now. And in 2 years, Marilyn is right. The Republican incumbent has not passed a single piece of legislation, nor has she championed policy to benefit our families. In fact, those no votes, I'll tell you what some of those are. You know, clearly she's out of touch with the district when she is voting no on the floor. She's not just voting no, she's the only person voting no on the floor on issues such as expanding early learning, public pre-K, criminal justice reform, equal pay, and even vote by mail. Imagine if the chaos that would have entailed if we had to form lines to vote during this pandemic. She even voted with reservations on topics that are clearly important to the district, such as regulating the vaping industry, and I believe we can do better. And finally, I'm a young, female, progressive immigrant who stands up for social justice and social equity. I believe it's everything that the other party is scared of. And we have a plan, but I won't reveal that in a strategy, and we need every voter to win. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Trish. Now we move into closing statements. So Trish, it's your turn.
Thank you. That went by fast. But thank you again to Lorna, Flora, and Rich. You don't see him, but or for organizing tonight's event. We truly are in a challenging place, you know, during this pandemic. COVID is not going to go away anytime soon, and we are going to experience new challenges, new crises, and old school politics and status quo is not the answer. If elected, I would be the only legislator in the House of Representatives and possibly in the Capitol with a strong public health and healthcare background after Lieutenant Governor Josh Green. I would also be the first immigrant and the youngest Democrat to be elected in our district's history. The very first year I joined the Democratic Party in Hawaii, I got elected as district chair of District 22 in Waikiki, where I was renting back then. I got involved with the Young Dems and the Women's Caucus, and when my husband and I bought our first home here in Mililani, I got elected the following year as district chair, and this is my second term now. Last year, I was appointed as co-chair of the Legislative Committee of Oahu County, where we hosted legislative town halls throughout Oahu to identify critical issues facing the people of Hawaii. Here in Mililani, our highest priority was healthcare. This process, you know, was the first time that it was done in the last 20 years and prioritized, it ended up in our House and Senate leadership creating an affordable and livable Hawaii legislative priorities. And, you know, I'm already involved, I'm already invested, and I'm committed to working very hard each and every single day to leave Hawaii a better place for our kids and grandkids. And finally, I'm not going to end this without saying thank you to everybody, all my supporters, including the Mililani residents watching tonight, including my family, and the dozens of volunteers who are helping me win this election. Thank you to all of you.
Okay, mahalo, Trish. Marilyn, closing statement.
Okay, well, thank you, Trish. And I would also like to thank the organizers of this forum because it has been something new for Mililani, and I think actually for the state. And Zoom is something that's new for the state too, so that has made it a little easier. I would like to say that I'm going to finish the rest of my opening statement, but before I do that, I want to say that when it comes to experience in healthcare, I have a history of 40 years in healthcare. And I have a history of working in our community in healthcare. I worked at Wahiawa General Hospital for 25 years. I opened the home health agency. I was manager of the home health agency, manager of the medical surgical unit. I was a nursing supervisor. And even today, I keep my CPR and my first aid up to date and help at various community functions. So I also lived abroad and was involved in healthcare for foreign service people in foreign countries, in the Philippines and in the Korea. And so, you know, I have a lot of hard experience in healthcare, and it's hands-on. And I think that's important. I've participated in the annual point-in-time count of the homeless for the last 4 years. Getting folks into housing is a basic step in their transformation, and healthcare is a big issue for them. Last, I want to mention the urgency of getting our children and teachers back to school. They've already lost a full quarter of the school year, and summer is now upon us. We'll take the schools, community, and workplaces to make the new normal at school possible. Perhaps there will be a combination in class time and online learning, and I think that is the plan for Mililani High School. The recovery will not be easy, but I'm willing to work hard, and I know my long experience in community, healthcare, and legislature will be a great advantage. And I would like to say, I'm not young. I am an older person, and I understand the difficulty of running an election when you are a person who is a senior, who's an older person. But I manage my own affairs. I live alone. I take care of my house, my community, my pets, and I can take care of a job at the legislature as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Marilyn and Trish. Lorna?
Well, I'm so pleased and delighted by the two of you, Marilyn Lee and Trish La Chica. Thank you. Thank you for stepping forward to run. Thank you for all of the work that you're doing far beyond your candidacy for office for the people of Mililani. And whoever wins this primary, you know we're going to be right here with you. So thank you, thank you. And with that, I'd like to say aloha and mahalo to all of you from the district and from around Oahu who have joined us here tonight. This event has been recorded and will be available on the Oahu Facebook page, and the two candidates will also be will have access to this recording and can post it where they will as well. So with that, aloha.
Aloha.